A lot of you guys who are experienced movers and into training, into yoga, into the various modalities, will notice that even though you can build capacity like strength or mobility, sometimes you'll still notice this lingering tension. And this lingering tension seems to creep back in no matter how many times you open up your shoulders or mobilize your hips. And so, yes, there's this obvious lifestyle cause for some of us. Perhaps we're sitting for a long time in the same position. Perhaps we're working in a repetitive physical job. But why is it that this tension creeps back? And what should you do about it? Primarily what I teach is a body-plus-psyche approach to healing and to functioning at a high level. So from this perspective, there are two things to address. The first is the subconscious, or these patterns of expectation that we embody. So psychologically, we end up in these patterns of expectation when we're exposed to a particular thing again and again. Let's say we're exposed to a certain kind of stress again and again, and it's one that we don't know how to handle, a problem that we're perceiving that we don't know how to solve. It could be social, it could be psychological, it could be at home in your relationship or in your career. When there's an expectation of conflict in this area, at some level, internal or external, the body is going to reflect that. It's going to reflect the expectation of having to protect in some way, having to grip for a certain outcome, or it's going to reflect our inability to stand for what we need and move towards that. So from that broad psychological aspect, this is kind of psyche, meaning spirit, meaning soul, meaning the way we think. That's all kind of wrapped up into that. The body is affected. The other aspect then is that when we move, whether you're training mobility or not, that expectation is filtering the way you respond to the mobility training. The expectation that you're holding psychologically, the pattern you've been in, the subconscious groove that you find yourself drifting into is going to color the training you're doing. So there's your state, and then there's the training stimulus. And when the training stimulus is combined with a different state, you'll get a different outcome. The simplest example of this is if you go into the gym and you're quite stressed and you're quite tense and you're quite upset or angry about something, your body's more likely to respond to that training stimulus as if it's threatening. People with chronic pain will notice all the time that when they're in this depleted or slightly frazzled or fearful or overburdened state, their body will flare up. It'll flare up from things that are unexpected. You might not be doing as much training as you have been, but it still hurts. You might be squatting a weight that was really easy for you and now it feels really off. In fact, I injured my back many years ago squatting a weight that was only 70% of my max. But I got so badly hurt because of the other factors that were going on psychologically, emotionally, and biologically. So it's all connected, but how the body processes a stimulus and what the training actually means for our adaptation is largely affected by our overall state of being. So this means we need to address this part, but in a lot of physical practices we don't, right? There's 5 exercises to open the hips. There's the best 3 things to do in your strength training. There's how to breathe to settle and down-regulate your nervous system. there's how to induce mental clarity. And yet the subconscious patterns, which are anchored into every part of our life, as I mentioned, relationships, career, all of this, these things are not being spoken about despite the fact that they have such a profound effect on the body and on the way the body receives those forms of input we're giving. Yoga, strength training, gymnastics, movement culture style training, dance, surfing, physiotherapy. If you're in a state of overwhelm, inflammation, if your system's just burdened, then there is no correct, potent exercise you can apply. The most correct, potent exercise will be the one which is most gentle and works within the capacity that you have based on your current state. So we need to see how these two things interact. I'm a bit distracted because there's a turkey, a bush turkey, pecking at my keys. And you might be about to see him. He's walking off. So with that said, what can you do to make sure that your training, your movement practice, and your healthy inputs, all these health supporting activities, give you the best possible results? What can you do to make sure you're actually benefiting from the training you're doing or from the practice you're doing, rather than just further stressing your body? Because there's obviously stress, which is neutral, and then there's whether it becomes distressing for us or whether it's more like eustress, which is kind of beneficial adaptation, right? So stress is just stress. Who we are in the moment and our state and how we're receiving that stress or interpreting that stress at a subconscious level is what causes the distress or the benefit. So the first thing you can do to prime your body and your subconscious to receive your practice or your stimulus and benefit from it is using a simple 4-phase cycle. The analogy that I give to my students is to take off the plane, fly the plane, land the plane, and then refuel. And the refueling part could happen before as well, okay? But the point is there's 4 phases. And these phases are energetic. They're in how we stimulate ourselves. And you'll notice parallels in these 4 phases, which I'll go into in a second, with the breath. So there's the inhalation, there's the retention, there's the exhalation, and then there's the pause. There's the sunrise, there's noon, peak, midday, there's the sunset, and then there's nighttime. There's the way we ingest food, there's the way we digest food, there's the way we metabolize that food, and then we eliminate what we don't need. There is spring, there is summer, there is autumn, and there is winter. And so everything that we do needs to be rhythmic and cyclical and transitory so that our nervous system and our body and psyche can transition and be ready for the stimulus we're going to apply. So in the simplest possible terms, that means set a clear intention of what you want from what you're about to do, whether it's training, physical practice, work, and then prepare yourself with a warm-up. And then do your main work, do the thing where you want to get in deep and apply that strong, specific adaptation signal, and then have some kind of cool down, which then leads into integration, which is like that preparation phase again for the next task. When people don't have this, what I see is they're more frequently in pain, they're more frequently stuck in states of chronic stress, and over a period of time, sometimes months, sometimes years, depending on how much inherent capacity that person has, there will eventually be a drop-off, a deterioration. You can only burn the candle at both ends for so long. You can only insist on high levels of output, maintain those high expectations for so long before they prove themselves to be unrealistic because you haven't prepared and supported yourself. You haven't been able to cash the check that you wrote energetically. Practically speaking, this looks like planning your training session based on the stimulus you want to elicit. What is it that you're working on? What is the effect that you want this activity to have on your whole system? What's the main effect, and what are the skills? And then you can prepare yourself for that effect and for those skills. So if I wanted to have a weightlifting session, Olympic weightlifting, and I want to be working with the weight overhead, I want to be in a deep squat, I want to have core stability and balance and power, then I'm first going to sit and fuel. Fueling means I've fueled because I've eaten well, I've slept well, and then I'm going to plan my session. Like, where are we going to fly to? And then once I begin, I'm preparing the plane to take off. I'm warming up the engine. So my warm-up needs to be something which excites my nervous system enough that it can begin to ramp up. So maybe I'm warming up with light squats. Maybe I'm replicating the movement pattern that I'm going to be doing when I'm hitting my heavy sets. I'm getting into the state where power is available. That means that I'm not lying down. It means I'm probably not going to be listening to slow, meditative whale sound music. It means that I'm beginning to step into the state which is most conducive to the stimulus. Obviously, between sets I can relax and whatnot because we have these little peaks even when we're flying. It's like we're moving with the weather. But I'm preparing myself. Now, if this session wasn't about power production and weightlifting, let's say that it was a mobility session, and what I wanted to do was rehab my hip because my hip was painful in a certain range of motion. I have the plan, I have the ranges of motion I want to work on, I know what kind of pain I'm experiencing, so I ground and I settle and I think, okay, what's my intention here? I fuel up. And then I'm going to go into that session and choose the movements I'm working on, and my intent is to be pain-free. My intent is to show my hips that movement doesn't have to hurt. So what kind of attitude am I then going to take towards those mobility drills? I'm probably going to take a somewhat gentle attitude, a somewhat receptive attitude. I'm going to ensure that I'm working within ranges where it's actually fun and where I can relax to a degree, and where I'm not ramming up against my edge and taking my nervous system into fight or flight. I'm breathing. I'm experiencing the discomfort of a muscular activation and the effort that brings with the slowing of my breath, with the easing of the muscles in my face. So all the time, in both examples, weightlifting and therapeutic mobility, I'm attempting to harmonize my psyche with my body, my state with the stimulus. And that creates the biggest open gateway towards change through every layer of my body. If I approach that mobility session with all of the bracing, tension, and intensity of a weightlifter, I'm going to get a very different effect. And if my hips are sore and if I'm feeling a little bit tired, it's not the right effect for that day. If I approach the weightlifting session like a yin yogi, then I'm probably not going to be harmonizing with the stimulus that I'm looking for. So what is the task? What is your central aim? What is it that you want to achieve with your practice? This should be guided by the season of your life. There is no one correct answer for everyone all the time. If you've spent most of your life in this kind of summer, fire element, retention, hot and intense energy, and you're noticing that some symptoms are coming up, or you're noticing you're no longer feeling warm towards that practice, and instead you're starting to feel a little bit boxed in, and intuitively you feel like it might be time for a change, well then perhaps your central goal should shift towards harmonization of the seasons, balancing your constitution. So maybe it's time for some flowy, mellow yoga. Maybe it's time for some swimming in cool water, to be supple and surrendered and to be moved rather than to be the one moving. So what we're doing is we're looking at this circle of the elemental and modal with all of its seasons, winter and summer, inhale and exhale, action and rest. And then we're trying to look at the big picture of life. Like, where have my needs been met? Where have they not been met? How long have I been stuck in one season for whatever reason, instead of allowing the seasons to cycle over and pass through? At the micro level, in terms of our relationships or our career, this same seasonality would look like trying to be in the same work output every day, every week, every month, every year, expecting this linearity of ourselves, even though we are a biological system operating within a natural world which has fluctuations. In the day, this might look like your calendar is either stacked back to back with slots and you don't have breaks in between to rest, recalibrate, clear out, and meditate, be empty. So you're trying to go from inhale to inhale to inhale, or you're just never sort of pausing in any of the 4 phases of the breath. And so the effect of that is inevitably a course correction at some point. At some point, nature, which is you, and your biology, which is innately connected already with the world, at some point it will request, and then it will demand, and then it will enforce some kind of change. And when you push against that, you experience the symptoms. You're either conscious of them, in which case you can make a course correction because you understand the cycles. So you change the way you eat, you change the way you move, you change the way you organize your calendar or your schedule or your daily rhythm. Or you're unconscious of that, and so your body reflects it for you. And what then happens is, when our psyche is fixed in a particular cultural conditioning about how we relate to our bodies, we often then project the problem onto the body, which is the messenger, rather than thanking the body for the message that it's giving and humbling ourselves toward the course correction, which may be not what we're used to, or not what we've become addicted to desiring now, but will ultimately serve us best longer term. So unfortunately for some people, this will be a diagnosis. And for some people, it's a severe diagnosis, or it's a severe injury, which may not even have been that bad to begin with, but then you insist on continuing and not listening to your body once it's shouted, and it only gets more and more debilitating. The debilitation is perfect, despite the fact it's not what you want, because the debilitation puts you out of action to the degree that you need to recuperate. The balance is mathematic, it's biological, it's like a natural principle, and it's beyond the level of intelligence that we can comprehend and mess with, but nonetheless, it is ordered. So, if you want to work with a simple reset now that we've covered the theory, this overview, a wonderful simple reset for your nervous system, which is going to generally help you regulate. Wherever you've been, it's going to bring you towards more of the center of that wheel so you can balance your state, is Taoist standing meditation. I'm going to guide you through Taoist standing meditation very briefly now, and this is going to help you to relate to stress in a healthy way. It's going to help you become more aware of your state of being. It's going to give you a little bit of control over that state of being, but not through force, rather through listening and harmony, which is a wonderful skill to have. So let's get straight into it. I might need to adjust the camera. All right, let's move the camera back. So what we're going to work with is a stance which is just outside of hip width. We're going to have the feet facing forward. The feet may be slightly turned in, and it's not about the exact degree, but it's about the feeling for you with your unique anatomy of being slightly turned in. Ideally you would do this with bare feet, but I want to keep my feet warm. The weight should be through the third and fourth metatarsal, so the base of the third and fourth toe, so that you feel an even distribution across the lateral spread of your foot. The weight from front to back should be somewhere under the shoelaces, just behind the ball of the foot, which means that you feel both a little bit springy and you also feel grounded in your heels. You're not falling back, you're not falling forward. This will enable your toes to be lightly reaching and slightly splayed, but not gripping and not lifted. From here, as you come up, you're going to keep the knees slightly, very, very, very slightly drawn out. And you can assist that with the feet. So this tiny lifting of the inner arch of the foot. As you have this tiny lift of the inner arch of the foot, you'll feel a subtle tension, a supportive, sprung type tension coming up the inside of your leg. Now from here, you'll sink down as if sitting on a bar stool. Sitting on a bar stool will mean that you'll sit slightly back and slightly down into your knees. From this position, check in on your balance again. Are you centered in your feet? Now travel up to the belly, sides and back. You don't want your butt to be sticking out like Kim Kardashian here, nor do you want it to be tucked under. You just want a very small drop of the tailbone down and a very small drop of the sternum down. What this does is it closes the space between the front of your pelvis and the front of your rib cage, and that enables the breath to feel more full in the belly and in the sides. Because you're closing the space at the front, when you breathe, you'll feel more open at the back. So the space between your low ribs towards your sacrum, which is kind of superficial to the kidneys, if you were to place your hands like this, you can feel it, that space is going to fill out. So you're going to go from like this to like this, filling out that space so that there's a sense of fullness. And then see if you can feel your breath gently moving into that space. Invite the breath rather than forcing it towards the hands. If you can perceive even a little bit of expansion and contraction, that's fantastic. Keep that posture now and allow your hands to rest on your thighs so that your thumbs are aligned just below your hip flexors and your fingertips are light. With that sense of fullness through your mid and lower back, lengthen slightly through the rear crown of the head so that the space behind the ears drifts gently up towards the sky. And see if you can perceive that sense of subtle stretch from the base of the skull down to the base of the tailbone. From here, you can imagine that a waterfall is melting the tension from the scalp all the way down the sides of the face and jaw, all the way down the sides of the neck, all the way through the shoulders, all the way through the elbows and to the hands. And that waterfall of melty tension release is also traveling down through the breath, which is located mainly in the belly, sides and back, kept low. It's melting through the hips, it's melting through the knees, it's melting through the feet. And as you release tension, as you listen to the tension and invite softness, you may want to micro adjust your posture, but I want you to stay balanced in your feet. I want you to stay long through tailbone to crown. And then I want you to enable your breath not to come up as you hide it and pull in your belly, but to fill and expand in every direction as if you're fully relaxing into the space around you. Some gentle swaying of the head can keep the neck muscles soft. A gentle release of the jaw can allow the face to be soft. And a gentle awareness of space across the collarbones and across the upper back will have you feeling neutral through your upper body. So you can simply stay in this posture now with eyes open or closed, looking just above the horizon, scanning through the body from toe all the way up to head. melting any tension you feel, and being attuned to your senses. And if you stay here for 10 minutes, 15, 20, 30, an hour, 2 hours, you'll experience a profound centering, a regulation of all bodily systems. And this practice is best done in the morning, but realistically, it's just best done. It's best to be still in this whenever you have an opportunity. And from there, you can then make decisions with a little bit more clarity in your training, in your life, in your movement practice. This will biologically, psychologically, neurologically help you settle. But remember, if you keep making the decisions you've made based on not listening to your body, then you'll get the same effects. Also remember that when you come into a state of balance, this may mean you need to make different decisions and subtly change some of the things in your life and the way you're showing up. If you do that, then the inputs of stress and inner conflict and lack of listening, which are causing your tension to come back again and again and again, will begin to dissipate. Training is one input, movement practice is one input, body therapy is one input. But all these other inputs that you have in your life, these other things that you're consuming, these other things that you're inviting and enabling, they are also coming in and affecting how you hold yourself. And ultimately, when you are in deep integrity with your biological needs, which is a constant process from breath to breath of recalibration forever, you never arrive. That recalibration of being with your breath, being with your body's needs, is what keeps the tension away. It's that level of presence. There's no one thing you can do now to lock yourself in a perfect state in a world which is moving, morphing, evolving, and growing. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and I will see you soon.